Hello folks, we're down south in Cornwall today. The RAF aren't the only ones to fly the Hawk, so we're going to give the Royal Navy a bit of love. This is Royal Naval Air Station Culdrose, home of 736 Naval Air Squadron. We're going to be taking a look at touch and goes and circuits. I'm not a real pilot, but hopefully some of you out there will find this helpful. If you like this video, please comment below and like and subscribe if you want to see more. So we'll land up on runway 29 at Culdrose. First we're going to set our HSI. So we're going to set our course indicator to our runway heading, which is 290. And we're going to set our heading book to the reverse runway, which is runway 11. So this will be 111. So gears down, flaps are half. All checked. Come up on the power. Forgot to set the anti-collision lights to white there. And release the brakes and we're away. Trying to keep it down the middle of the runway with the rudders and toe brakes to start off with. So we're looking for 90 knots. Bring the nose wheel up. And we should lift off around 120 knots. Looking for 8 to 10 degrees nose up on the attitude. Gear coming up. And the flaps coming up. So we're going to peel off around to the left. Just checking out left hand side. We'll turn out left now. Just passing over the town of Porthleven here. We're going to take a long run round, and first of all we're going to do a run in and turn and brake for our first attempt at landing. I have to recommend anybody doing this or any flight simulation at least to get head tracking, or I'm in VR here. It adds so much more feel and more control to what you're doing. It just gives you that much better sense of awareness, and it actually makes things a lot easier. So we just skipped ahead and we're starting our run in back on runway 29. So we're looking for about 500 feet down the runway, 380 to 400 knots. And this is the fastest way to slow one of these jets down. So I've done about 500 feet. Going to turn and brake at the end here. So pull 4G, power 0, air brakes out. And we're looking to climb to about 1,000 feet. We're watching that HSI and we're going to level out on that heading book we set earlier to 111. There we go. Level with the runway. Below 200 knots, so gear down. Flaps half. I'm trimming now. So we're not fighting that nose, so trimming back. Looking for about 150 knots on the downwind leg here. And wait for that wingtip to get about 45 degrees from the end of the runway. So turning in now, and as we turn in, we're going to start descent and go full flaps. So we've got 500 kg of fuel, so our threshold speed, so it's 110 plus 1 for every 100 kilos of fuel. So we're looking for a threshold speed of 115. When we turn out onto the final here, we should be looking at around 130 knots. Slowly working that throttle to control the speed. Looking for the lights, can see 4 whites at the minute, so a little bit high. That's 2 whites, 2 reds, so that's pretty good. So I want to start and bleed the speed up now, looking for that 115 knots. You need to really fly the aeroplane down onto the runway with the Hawk. So flare last minute, touchdown. Keep straight on the rudders. Back on the power, full power. She gets airborne again. Gear up. Flaps up. 8 to 10 degrees climb out. And we're looking for about 190 knots. And try and maintain 190 knots around the turn. Watching those instruments, make sure we're climbing up. Looking about 1,000 feet. Watching that HSI come round, looking for that heading bug. Below 200 knots. So gear down, flaps off again. Trying to maintain 1,000 feet. I can already see here we've come around much too tight this time. We're a lot closer to the runway than we really should be. Maybe pulled a little bit hard in that turn. Again, we're waiting for that wingtip to get level with the runway. Look for about 45-degree angle off the wingtip. About 45 degrees now. Start a turn in. Full flaps again. So this is going to be really tight this time. I probably should have aborted this one. Again, we're looking for 130 knots on the rollout. You can see we've overshot a bit because we're in too tight. Looking for those lights, watching that speed. Still a bit high. Bleeding off that speed. Looking for that 115 knots at the threshold. Flying it down to the runway again. There we go, holding that nose off. Back on the power. Looking for 8 to 10 degrees climb out again. Positive climb. Gear coming up, flaps coming up. We're looking for 190 knots in the turn again. You want to be turning about a 45-degree angle. Want it to come round a bit more gentle this time. Give ourselves a bit more room. Again, looking to climb up to that 1,000 feet. Trying to maintain the speed. Looking for that heading bug coming round. Watching those instruments all the time. Going on the heading bug. Much more space this time. We're a little bit fast, just over 200 knots. Letting that speed bleed off. Get the gear down and the flaps down to half again. There goes the gear. And down comes the flaps. Bleeding off to 150 knots on the downwind. See, we've got a lot more space this time to turn. Waiting for that wingtip to get about 45 degrees again. go. So full flaps, turning in, starting a descent. It's all about watching those instruments, trying to maintain those speeds. Just going through the process, step by step. Looking much better this time. Two whites, two reds, so we've got glide path. Watching that speed, got 130 knots. Controlling that power, controlling that glide. Run it down onto the runway. You literally have to drive it down right onto the runway. Let that speed bleed off, looking for that 115 knots at the threshold. Looking a lot better this time. Late flare. Nice gentle touch down. Keep it straight on the rudders. Back on the power. And away we go again. 8 to 10 degrees. Remember that 8 to 10, climb out. Gear up, flaps up. Try not to exceed 200 knots. Keep it around 190 in the turn again. A little bit quick there. Round we go again. We're coming for a full stop landing this time. I'm maintaining that climb up to 1,000 feet. 8 to 10 degrees. Watching that HSI come round, watching that speed. Always trying to stay ahead of the aeroplane. That heading bump coming round. There we go. It's a lot better now. Below 200 knots, gear down, flaps down, or flaps half. Bleeding the speed off to 150 knots. Just correcting my course a little bit here. Trying to maintain altitude. Waiting for that wingtip to get that 45-degree angle. There we go. And flaps down, and in we go again. Watching that speed. Got 3 whites and a red, or 4 whites now. 3 whites and a red again. A little bit higher. Watching that speed. Remember, fly it down onto the runway. 2 whites, 2 reds, that's good. Letting the speed bleed off. Looking for that 115 knots. Late flare. There we go. So get that nose wheel down now. Now we can start to get on those toe brakes. As the speed comes off, start to apply back pressure to the stick. Helps the plane slow down. The slower you get, the more pressure you can put on. Now be careful not too much because you'll bring the nose up again. Full back pressure now on the stick. Just keeping it going on the rudder and the toe brakes. Release the stick now. And bring it to a stop and turn off. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope somebody's found it useful. Like I say, I'm not a real pilot. Just a simmer, simming the dream.